true. That's a Nietzsche idea. And it would be fully developed by gay theorists in the last 20, 25 years. And there's two things that have happened that I think are extraordinary. The first one is that, we're having conversations around, gay marriage and homosexuality. In the next 5 years, those words will be bigoted. They will no longer be part of the current conversation. What kind of the cutting edge queer theorists want to do is they want to deconstruct everything. They want to live in a world in which there is no such thing as gender, and there's no such thing as orientation or attraction. What it is we have these wisps of consciousness. We exist, and I have desire, I have politics, I have fetish, I have capability, I have intellect, other people do. There's all kinds of reasons in which I might interact with another person. And the goal is to sexualize, or at least have the potential that all those spaces are sexualized. And in that world in which there is no objectivity around the body or what we do with it, because neither objective reality doesn't exist, and the good that society can bring about is actually choice. The gospel of arguing about what the Bible says makes absolutely no sense to a non-believer. They're not there at all. We now live in a world in which authenticity is the high moral good. And I share all of that to say these are important things, but to reach the world in which we now live in, we are going to have to be winsome to articulate a gospel that's good news to someone who doesn't believe in truth, that doesn't believe that anything outside of himself or herself can tell them who they ought to be, what they ought to do, their purpose or meaning in life. It is a world without responsibility because existence doesn't matter. And you would think that there'd be no Christian who would believe such a thing. And but there's a whole movement among kind of queer pastors. Nadia Bolz-Weber, she is the perfect example of someone who's embodying this kind of deconstructionist, post-structural, postmodern reality. Listen to what she does in all of her podcasts. Listen to what she does with Josh Harris. It is all around this kind of embracing of your internal sexual self, exploring it, being honest about it. It has nothing to do with sin, it has nothing to do with goodness or evil. It is all about, will you accept me as I am, and can we celebrate that? The gospel, we have to figure out a way in which the gospel is good news there. And I think it's really important that we are people who are intentionally engaging in the cultural conversation. Queer theory, the people that are kind of the forerunners of this are very smart people, and they're stealing our children and our young adults. Barna just came out with some research, it might be a little high, but 40% of young adults now identify as LGBTQ. That has nothing to do with desire. That's not everyone just turned, they have gay feelings now. What it means is that the world that the LGBTQ community offers is the best world that they understand. And the restraints of Christian morality just seems arbitrary and archaic. And we have to, as ministers and lovers of Jesus, find good news for them. There is good news, but our work is cut out for us. Over the next a little bit of time, I just want to share what I think are some things that we have learned. A group of us about 15 years ago came together and said, you know what, we want to do exactly what you're doing. We want to stand and fight for the RCA. We want to fight for fidelity. We want to fight for grace and truth being married together. I grew up in a Christian home. I dealt with same-sex attraction in my adolescence. I had gay relationships as a young adult. I was a drug addict. And it was in all of that mess in which Jesus encountered me. And I have encountered the living Lord in my body, in my desire. And that's all being lost today for a variety of reasons. And I think we have to capture that. And we, in the RCA, about a group of 10 churches, some of the largest churches in the RCA, we committed to get into the polity, to fight. And, we did some things really well. We built a lot of friendships, but I would say that we failed in that there are some things that we allowed to happen that we didn't need to, but that you guys, I think, will have to decide whether it's worth it or not to do for the sake of the purity of the church, for the sake of the gospel, and for moving forward. So these, I think, 9 or 10 things are areas in which I think we learned a lot, and that I want to give to you. And if they're helpful, they're helpful. But most importantly, what I want to help you do is position yourselves to be gospel churches, to be places in which the sexual sinner can find a home. Somebody wrote me a letter. I was on some radio show in Chicago, and she wrote me this beautiful letter. She was a lesbian in a lesbian relationship, and she encountered Jesus Christ. And she knew right off the bat that God was calling her out of this relationship into, this devotion to Jesus. And she's in love with Jesus, but she's absolutely lost in her local church. No one knows what to do with her. If that is the answer that we're going to give, or what we're going to do, then we have little right to share a pure sexual ethic, because we have no alternative. And that's what I hope to help us to do tonight, is to find ways of defending what is true, but to be gracious in the gospel. Hopefully you got a handout. If not, maybe they will send it soon. But these are some of the things that I think we have learned that I think is really important. The first one is this is not about homosexuality, but about hermeneutics. If you're a traditionalist, the way that we read the scripture is through the author's intent. That's what we want to know. We want to know the author's intent and the historical context in which something is written. And we think that the simplest explanation is always the best. And because we're Reformed, we're looking to build a cohesive story from beginning to end. That's the traditional reading, and it's the longest way of reading the scriptures. What happened with the Jesus Seminar and kind of critical theory is that all of a sudden the Bible was taken to be a piece of literature among other pieces of literature. And as soon as you do that, you can begin to critique it. And one of the ways you critique it is culturally, or through the eyes of oppression or patriarchy, or all the ways that one might read it. And that enables you to rewrite the ethics of scripture. And that's fundamentally what's going on. You're not going to find one person in your world who's CRC, who is pro-gay marriage, who says, I don't believe in the scriptures. And but what they do believe is that there are other authorities. And that fact right there is where the line is. That is the fundamental problem. And it has to be articulated. It has to be given examples of, and if people are of good will, they ought to be able to admit it. You both aren't reading the scripture in the same way and coming to different conclusions. You are reading it in a traditionalist fashion, according to context and author's intent, following the history of the church, while progressives read the scripture in light of other authority. So the Bible has an authority, but it's a cultural artifact, and Paul was limited, or Jesus was limited. And we know these things now that they didn't know. And so we have to help them along. That's just a radically different way of reading the Bible. And I don't think we did a good job of articulating that well. I mean, we said it, but like you, we're a very dispersed body, right? There's all kinds of ways. There's different councils, there's churches, there's elders, there's synods, there's all kinds of bodies. And I think if we were to do it again, I think one of the things that I would think a lot about and seek to exert is this idea of in what ways can we define the conversation to the degree that the conversation is about whether, do you love gay people or not? If it's framed that way, then we always come off as restrictive, bigoted people, even though it's not true, because that's the cultural lens. But around hermeneutics, it's a strong argument. And you have to move far away from the biblical tradition to do what they're doing. And I think it's worthy of writing about, having conferences about, of getting churches on the same page about. And I would bet you, I don't know if the RCA is, or the CRC is close to the RCA, there's a large majority of your pastors that very faithfully every week, they look at the text, they look at commentaries that seek to get authorial intent, they look at the arc of redemptive history, they try to bring in Jesus Christ, and that's what they do. That's not what they're doing on the East Coast of the RCA. They're bringing in feminist theory, they're bringing in queer theory, they're bringing in all kinds of things, science, biology, all kinds of knowledge. And what they say is that the Bible has to reckon with this knowledge. And our starting point is all knowledge has to reckon with the Bible. And I believe that with all my heart. I don't always understand what's going on there, but it's the final word for my life. I live it, or I try to live it. I at least believe it in the depths of my bones. Many of your pastors believe it, and much of your congregations believe it. And that right there is the issue of the divide, because it can go into all kinds of places. As soon as you play that game, you can do all kinds of things with the scripture that is deeply problematic. And so I think to the ways that you can frame it around that as the most important issue, in which homosexuality or same-sex relationships are a serious cultural example of what's going on, I think it's helpful. You guys are doing pretty well. You're having reports, and you guys are pretty positive, at least at at the national level. I know some of you guys, and you seem to be holding the line. What you have to understand about a minority movement is it is built for them to win. And this is what I mean. They can just, every loss, they just get up the next day and do it again. And they are, I would assume, if there's an intellect behind this, as it was in the RCA, is they're playing the long game. They're not looking to win this year. They're looking to win over the next 10 years. And if you don't take seriously right now that you very well might be losing, you're not going to make any effective change that's going to be helpful for the denomination. And so the idea of crisis is here. And I think in the RCA, one of the things that happened is that everyone's moment of crisis came at different times, so that it dribbled out. Kevin DeYoung, several years ago, his point of crisis. And then a couple more years, some people went to the PCA. A few other years, some people left. And then now there's this moment. But there's still tons of people that I know who are conservative people. It's like, we're going to fight it out. We can do it. We're going to make a way. If 10 years ago, we were all on the same page and decided that together we're going to move, we probably could have had real positive effect and got to a place that saved the RCA. And so that sense of this is the moment, there is, we can't wait. If we wait, we've lost. That sense of urgency, I think, is really important. And it's not fake. Our systems are built to be so slow and non-reactive that if we follow the rhythm of our systems, we will find that we have lost only because we actually aren't getting to the root of the problem, which are these liberal voices in places of authority whom we actually don't deal with whether or not they should be in authority. And as long as they're part of the conversation, here's something that's so interesting. Why did Vision 2020 fail? The RCA is overwhelmingly conservative, or it was, hopefully it still is. So, we're talking 70, 75%, maybe 80% conservative. When they did that Vision 2020, what they said is, well, we need to hear from everybody. And so it is no way representative of the RCA. It's representative of our cultural conversation. So there were some pro-gay folks, there were some conservatives, and then there were some moderates. That isn't the RCA. The RCA would be something like, 6 conservatives, 4 moderates, and 1 LGBTQ person. That's the RCA. But because we allowed others to frame the argument and didn't have a sense of urgency that matters, we lost it, and we lost the conversation. And so that sense of urgency, I think, is really, really important. I've been thinking a lot about this. I live in the state of Illinois, and I don't know, where you guys are at, but we right now, we've had a set of legislation for our education system that is extraordinary. My kids all go to public school, and they have passed a new sex education bill that if schools teach sex education, they are mandated to teach kids about transitioning, about homosexuality, about pornography, about different ways to masturbate, where to get medicine to transition, just on and on and on it goes. And it starts in the 2nd grade and it goes through the 12th grade. Now, a school can opt out of teaching sex ed, and then they don't have to do anything. But if they do any of it, they have to do all of it. And I consider that to be so intrusive, just as a person who has boys in school. I find it, I think people are of goodwill for the most part. I find this evil. I find that I think most rational people, unless they're deeply politicized, I think that's a really bad idea. And what's interesting is that the school can do all this without notifying the parents. In fact, they can keep most of it confidential and allow the kids just to go off the rails apart from parental interaction. And so I was talking about this with a group of political leaders in Illinois. I'm not really a political person, but someone asked me to come speak. And so I spoke about this. And afterwards was a pollster who came on. And his key point was what people really care about right now is the next generation and their kids. And to the degree that you frame the conversation around your children, about your grandchildren, and the kind of world they're going to live in, you're going to sweep the political world. And that's about politics, but I also think it's true about this conversation. The people who are the most outspoken, for the most part, at least it was true in the RCA, are people who have gay sons and daughters or granddaughters, and they feel an obligation to speak on their behalf and to make a way for them in the church. And, praise the Lord for that. You can't fault a parent for loving their kid, even if it's, not helpful. But there's a lot of parents and grandparents in your denomination who care deeply about their kids and think the world's is the world. If they were to embrace the world view of the current moment, their kids are set up for disaster. And I think to the degree that you can frame it around, what are we going to catechize our children with? Are we not going to have any answer about sexuality? Are you really thinking that the best thing we could do is say we're still talking about it? I'm in the, I have 2 teenagers. I have, my boys all go to public school. They're all very thoughtful people. I can imagine a world in which I would say that to them. I'm not really sure what you should do with your body or how you should name it or what, how you ought to think about it. And can a denomination say, oh, we're we're gonna keep talking about it. You don't have time to talk about it. We're already losing young adults by the droves just because of the moment. Now with this, the enemy is going to steal them. And so we have an imperative to fight for our kids. And that has to do with catechizing our children around godly sexuality, around what matters, and to fight off the wolves. And, you can think whatever you want as an adult, and I have a lot of room, and I think fair enough. I have friends who are gay. I have family who are gay. I love them. I'm not going to, I'm not going to disparage them or not love them or not be in a relationship with them. But I think when you start acting towards my children or the children of the church, I think you're a wolf, and I think we have to deal with them as wolves. And I'm telling you, that's the whole game. The whole reason for the educational system doing this, the reason that, these top queer leaders, theorists are acting this way, because whoever has this generation's mind wins everything in the next generation. And we have a lot of work to do in the church and in our communities to counteract that. And I think it's a real great way to fight this and to think about it is to think about our kids. And again, it's not just, let's think of ways of, tricking people. I think it's really true. And I think to the degree that we can talk about it that way, it's good. I've been in the RCA since 2007 or so, 2006. I've been part of every interaction around this topic except for one. And in every one of them, what people wanted to do is they wanted to have conversation. And everything was framed around that. And they would bring in experts who knew how to do conversation. And the whole idea was, let's not make decisions so much as learn to love one another. And so we're going to slow this way down with these conversations. And so, I'll share what who I am and my story, and then the lesbian pastor will share her story, and they're equal stories, and we're all around the table, and we're going to do nonviolent communication, and we're going to say, what, these are no story is better than another story, and we're going to at least start at that place, and we're going to be human with one another. It's all very interesting, except you lose if you do that. And the reason you lose is because that's the long game. The long game is to keep talking about everybody's experience and not talk about what's actually going on. And, I remember, people talking about it, I can't believe that we're doing this again. And, at first I thought, well, fair enough. I like people. I don't have any problem. But looking back, it's a strategy. It's a strategy to moderate the discussion, and moderation is your enemy. To moderate this discussion is to lose. There is no moderation here. Time is on the progressive side. As long as they can get you to talk without drawing lines, they win. And so, what, I don't know how you are set up, but General Synod Council or, General Synod would set up these, General Synod say, hey, we should do this Council of, Jerusalem and make a decision. And then the whole thing is framed in such a way in which no one can have an opinion. It's like, no, we don't want to hear opinions. We want to talk about our stories. And that's all helpful and good. But you see, that falls into this idea that what really matters is, can we be authentic with one another? It's not a Christian worldview. That's not what we're doing. We're talking about salvation, heaven and hell, the gospel, life and death. And so let's talk about that. And let's talk about the wolves that are taking our children. Let's talk about things that really matter, what we do with our body, not angrily, but seriously. And so I would do everything I can to shut that down and to frame it in such a way of to say, I think that is a tactic from either those who are moderate or institutionalists or progressive to not have the conversation about what actually matters. And the RCA did that for 20 years. And it was really the brainchild of Wes Grenberg Michelson. And he won. He did it. He won. Hey, first he said, let's not talk about it. Let's just be friends. And then he left. And then Tom DeVries came. And Tom DeVries, good guy, friends of ours. He said, just hold on. Give me 10 years. Just let's get to know one another. Let's find a way. Let's make peace. There is no peace. There isn't peace. You can say there's peace, that there should be more conversation, but you do that and it's done. You might as well close shop. And I think I called a couple people on this a couple of years ago, friends of mine who had a conversation with Room for All in the RCA and then put out a paper. And the whole thing, because the basis of the conversation was, what do we agree upon? In other words, how can we be together? There's no way to be together. Give me a break. And so, I stirred the water a little bit, and but we worked it out. And they, my friends, they rescinded the letter, and rightfully so, because this is not what we're doing. We're not trying to, these are leaders. These aren't people who, my neighbors who are struggling with, their gender. I'm not doing this with them, or my friend who thinks that maybe he's gay. I'm doing it with leaders who say they lead in the Church of Jesus Christ. And that means they got to play big boy ball. And if they can't, they should leave. And, people can do that with us as well. We ought to live the life in which we proclaim. But it is a huge mistake to say, what we really need to do is hear one another. And it was the way I think we lost everything in the RCA because of that one tactic. I think it's really important that you guys name the win. The win isn't that this year that you get your sexuality paper positioned approved. That's a great thing. If that, I think, I keep little tabs on you guys. But that doesn't stop the liberals from the next year coming back with their own paper. That doesn't stop, the woman who's on your denominational leadership team that, who teaches people through your polity how to embrace gay marriage. That doesn't stop her. It doesn't stop liberals from pushing their agendas at the local body. All it does is it reaffirms what you think. We all know what we think. What we have to do is to deal with what is, when I'm speaking of leaders, is a cancerous reality that will destroy the whole body if it's not dealt with. The win is the division of your church, of the denomination, that those who are liberal would go join the PCUSA, or they'd go become Unitarians. They're all in over there. The Unitarians are ready to take you. The PCUSA would love to have you, but not here. That's the win. And anything short of that is 20 years of just heartache. And, that sounds really harsh. I don't mean to be harsh. I have friends who are quite liberal. Some of them are, some of the biggest proponents of gay marriage in your denomination. I absolutely love them, but they're absolutely wrong. And they haven't worked out the implications of being together on this. And this is a central gospel issue, because if we can't even define sin, then why is there, or what is the good news? And so you can't go, well, hey, we're going to win this year and we're going to hope there's momentum over time. The whole system is built to not have any momentum. The system is built to protect the minority. And that's all. Those are actually all modern inventions that we could talk about later, at least in the RCA it was. But what we have to is say the win is first to make sure the denomination is faithful, and then to push out those leaders and those churches that just don't see the same way. And there are mechanisms to do that. There are ways to do that that I think are at least, kind. If Calvin was around, we'd bring everybody under charges and we'd go to town. I don't know if that world exists anymore. I don't think we've done ourselves a service because we weren't doing that with divorce, or maybe you guys were, we weren't. And so all of a sudden, this great Reformed tradition of discipline and the word, we found out that we were kind of doing the word well, but we weren't doing discipline at all. And so you can't pull it out as the last stop effort. And so I think the win is the division of the church, in which those progressive leaders and churches go to another denomination. That's what I think. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. Before we left the RCA, we met with the denominational staff of the CRC, and there were, I don't know if it's the staff or your general count, the Synod leadership team, or however you guys operate, but there were about 15 people there. There were professors there. There were all kinds of interesting people there. And, we start with, and, there's 15 of us, and, they were sharing all kinds of interesting things. And then I asked them, I said, I'd like to know what each one of you believes about homosexuality and Jesus Christ. Your president, or your, whatever he is, not your president, your general secretary, or your equivalent, answered very beautifully. He's a traditionalist. He said it barely a whisper. I think he was afraid someone's going to attack him, but he's a traditionalist. He's a good man. Then everyone else, I didn't understand a word they said. Some lady said that it doesn't matter, that what matters is our polity. And another person said, well, we're still talking about it. And all those people need to go. They have to go. If they haven't figured that out, then they can't lead a denomination. They need to go do something else. And you guys have to demand it. You still have the power and authority to do it. Do it now. And it seems cold-hearted, but what other choice do you have? Whoever runs your denomination decides so much behind the scenes that you can pass whatever you want, but they can slow it down in a myriad of ways. And so there ought to be a demand in whatever fashion you can do to clean that out. And who has done this is Western Seminary. I've always loved Western. It was, when I went there, it was crazy business, and, Joy Bechtel and all her, whatever nuttiness they were doing. But both Tim Brown and now Felix, I don't remember his last name, they were committed to of moving Western away from a liberal seminary into the evangelical world. And, they still have a few holdouts, and, they're probably not as conservative as some of us would like, but they are centrally evangelical. And what they did is slow but sure, they removed everyone who was radically progressive, and they would either, if they weren't a professor, they just wouldn't hire them again. If they were tenured, as soon as they retired, they brought in another person, or if someone left, they brought in another person. So now what they have is this kind of central core of really solid professors. It was a 15-year journey to do that. But Western is about the best thing the RCA has going on right now. And, but they show you a model of how it's possible with persistence around a vision, persistence around a group of people to make sure it happens. And so, but we lost it in the weeds, where, the people who plan who's on the teams, who makes up all the rules, and who have the whisper conversations with the liberals and show them how just in your polity they can get around whatever you decide. As long as that's going on, no one's acting in good faith. And I think the best thing you can do is, I don't know. Homosexuality shouldn't be the litmus test. You should give them a piece of scripture and ask them to tell us what that means. And if they don't have a hermeneutic in which any faithful church would use, they shouldn't be on your leadership team as a denomination. These are just all random. There are no, and I sound so mean. I'm such a nice person, like in person. I've never, if you get me alone in an office, I'll do whatever you want. I'm much more bold when when I'm in front of people. And so, but I think I do think that there's a kind of kindness that is worldly, that doesn't differentiate between who you are and what I am. And I think we did a lot of that. I think I did a lot of that. And because I just wanted people, I didn't want people to be upset. Like I had this lesbian pastor, she was weeping when, we were talking at this dinner. It's like, well, I don't want you to weep. You're a real nice person, but you know what? She probably needs to weep. And I probably need to weep, that I even have to say such a thing. It's time to weep. And I think, if you're going to take it seriously, you have to take it seriously. And you're going to have to play as if this matters. In your seminary are liberal professors, and those liberal professors are very dangerous. And the reason they're dangerous is they're really smart. You got some people around at Calvary Seminary who are pro-gay, and who are national leaders even, who are very dangerous because they have authority, either, however it happened, people listen to them. And if you keep everything conservative at every step of the way, but your seminary is producing liberal pastors, you're done. Because again, every year, 10 more come out, 20 more come out, 30 more come out. And so I think probably one of the things that the RCA did, I don't know how it happened, by God's grace, was that there was a real fight for those seminary president positions. And those presidents came in with a vision and an agenda to clean house. And I think a lot could happen around that, or at least the pressure on that president to really put pressure on professors, one, to be honest about where they're at, and two, to just be honest that Calvin Seminary trains up pastors. It is a professional school. It's academic in the sense of, they're learning things and they're writing about things, but it's not Harvard. Western Seminary isn't, Harvard. What we are, we're teaching people how to pastor. That means there has to be a fidelity and a practicality to it. And if the whole journey is to ruin your hermeneutic and your Christian faith, and you expect them to stay conservative through it all, a 22-year-old, you're dreaming. They're going to be gone. And the people that, it's extraordinary. These sweet people go to seminary and, they love the Lord. And by the time they're out, they don't even know if God exists, and they think that's the best thing ever. And so to the degree you have influence on Calvin, it's important. Calvin is a more academic institution than Western was. It's more lauded. I don't know. I think that's a good thing. It's good to be smart, but it is not good to give up the primary mission of that seminary, which is to train up pastors. That means, getting caught up in the myth and mythologies of our world and what new liturgies we can do. I'm not sure if that's helpful to anybody. And what you need to know at the very least is that whole space is very dangerous. And if it's not dealt with, it will come back to bite you in the butt. You guys need a coalition. This is great. You need a big coalition. The bigger, the better. One of the things I found in the RCA so interesting is that none of us like to be with others or follow anybody. And so we're all for orthodoxy, but, Bill will start a group of 4 people, and Steve will start a group of 10 people. And, Bill will have, he'll get a few more people, but Bill doesn't like Steve. And so they don't do things together. And it's all kind of ego trip. And I saw that play out a lot in the RCA. And this is too serious to do that. The bigger the coalition, the more influence you have. If the coalition is big enough, it consumes polity. It consumes the inner workings of your denomination, and it demands answers that have to be given just because of the size of it. And so I don't know who the main leaders are in your denomination and who, carries weight, but to get them into a room and to say what we need is a coalition together, and we're going to lead this together, and we're not going to, have personality subcultures here, is absolutely essential. And we came very close to doing it, but it fell apart in a couple of ways. But I would think that within the, CRC, similar to the RCA, getting those pastors, Reformed pastors are very hard to herd. And I know from experience, because I'm very hard to herd. You tell me to go left, I'll go right. And that's good and bad. But to do this, there's going to have to be a real humility among all the leaders to say, I don't love everything about Bill, but man, I love this. And we're going to do this together for the sake of the gospel. And we're going to lose our personalities and our little grievances and, they're traditional, they're contemporary, whatever the silly things are. And, none of that matters if it's all gone. So I think to the degree that we can build a coalition that is wide and expansive, the better you'll do. And as soon as you have it, do something with it, like Abide. I don't know how many pastors are involved, but you start talking about 200, 300 churches. That's a big deal in the CRC. And so you're talking about at least a quarter, if not a third, of churches. We'll do something with it, and think outside of the box. Things that we talked about that we never did, but maybe we should have, is if we all decided not to pay assessments for 1 year, and if it's big enough, they cannot seat us at General Synod, but they're going to have to sit at some table because they're not going to exist. And that is well within your right to do, because this is a gospel issue. They can't force you into, you have to follow the book of church order because you're good people. If there's heresy and it's not being dealt with, and you guys hold back $1 million or $2 million that's essential to the working of the denomination, you might not sit at General Synod, but either they'll come or the whole thing falls apart. And so those kinds of things, again, it seems, doesn't seem very nice, but if you don't do that, no one else is going to play. No one's going to, everything's going to be done to marginalize and isolate and characterize you guys as bigots and on the wrong side of history. And you have to act swiftly and nimbly together with the ability to make as big of impact as possible. And what happened in the RCA is what exactly has happened is the largest churches, except for a couple of the East Coast churches, are leaving or have left the RCA. Their funding, the drop in funding is so dramatic that the RCA will have to radically restructure. Now, so the same thing is happening, but without the hope of redemption, right? And so you wonder if you would have done that 5 years ago, and to say, hey, these are the things that have to happen, what good it could have done. The last two, and then we'll do questions if anyone wants to do questions, is that all of this only matters if you yourself are serving the sexually broken. And there's a King Corver in Southern California, Paramount Church, Emmanuel. He has had, he's a guy who never dealt with same-sex attraction or anything, but he's had dozens or numerous men who have become part of that church who were either gay or same-sex attracted or confused or addicted, who have been transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ and now live very meaningful, quiet lives of holiness. And now Ken has real authority. No one gets to push Ken around and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Ken can say, the gospel is extraordinary, and it changes us and it transforms us. And I have numerous people who can say such were some of us, but now we've been transformed and made new. And so the authority we have is to the degree that we actually give good news to people. And what I have found in my world is some of the most staunchly conservative churches in their own house are the least gracious. And there's a real need to make this clear. The way that I deal with a leader at a denominational level, I'm not discipling them. I'm calling them to give an account. But to the many people in whom I've walked with throughout the years who are struggling, who are hurting, who are addicted, who are gay, straight, transgender, whatever their thing is, primarily what I'm doing is I'm loving them and bringing them to Jesus. I'm loving them and bringing them to Jesus. And I have no problem having conversations about ethics. I have no problems talking about right and wrong. But we're not saved because of right and wrong. We're saved because of Jesus Christ and the blood of the Lamb. We're saved because we take our place with him in death, so that by some means we might participate in his resurrection. And so we have to do that. We have to find it. And at the very least, you have pornographers in your church. You got some good, adulterers in your church. You have people who are misogynistic. You have all kinds of things that are real sins, divorce, that you can grab onto and be gospel people so that you have authority. And, I think if we don't do that, the gospel loses such power. The gospel is so weak around sexuality right now. It's lamentable. The best that we're doing among the brightest people of our time who are Christian, who are Orthodox, is nothing changes, and I limp through the world in lament until I die. And, we all limp and we all have trouble, but that is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's not the hope of the gospel. That's not what Paul says in 1 Corinthians, stop this stuff and get right. Such were some of you, and life really is horrible now. And let's make sure we all, grieve until we die. The gospel is good news. It's good news for gay people, straight people, Muslim people, transgender people. It's good news for everybody. And we have to make sure we're declaring it, we're living it, we're doing it. And I think everyone needs a sexual sinner in their midst to just walk with and be friends with. There's many people whom I walk with and whom they're not my projects, they're my friends. And I love them deeply. And they know what I think, and I hope they have grace for me. I have grace for them. And I'm playing the long game with them because I know Jesus loves them dearly. And I have no problem telling them that something is wrong, but I don't think that's the primary issue. I just think they haven't met Jesus. And so I'm going to do everything they can to meet Jesus. And if their sin gets in the way, then I'm more than happy to help with that. And so do all we can to serve the sexual sinner. The more that there's transformation, the more that there's hope for that the gospel does something to our sexuality, the more good news we have. Here's something so interesting in my own church. And, I've been here for a while, and we did a whole thing on sexuality. And we had a moment of repentance where people could come forward if they think they had sexual sin. And it was women who came forward, and like one guy. Now, I know for a fact I could start calling out names and say, hey, Bill, you told me you struggle with pornography. Where are you? But what is interesting about that is we live in a world, our religious worlds, in which it is very hard to be sinners. And that's on me as a pastor. That's on you. So that, pretending doesn't do anyone any good. And so the first thing we have to do is to get people to feel safe enough to be sinners. And, my church, several hundred people, some 20-30% of those people deal with pornography. There's adultery in my house. There's lust, there's all kinds of things. There's divorce, there's abuse. And my church is good news only to the degree in which those folks meet Jesus Christ and get saved. And if all I do is rail about gay marriage and, transgender people, I don't know. I just feel like I don't really have a lot of authority to speak about because I'm not dealing with my own house. And then the final thing, and I'll take questions if you want to do questions, is your sexual purity matters. What you do matters. Pastors, the percentage of pornography use is really high. And affairs, emotional affairs, hidden lives. At the very least, don't preach anything about the fidelity of the gospel and sexuality. If you're in sexual sin, be real quiet and hope no one notices. But if you add on to your darkness with preaching against and lamenting against sexual sin, you're going to be judged for that in a way that's much harsher than just being found out, which will be harsh enough. And so I have one of the things I think is really helpful, especially with young pastors. I just assume that every young man that I hire deals with pornography in some level. And so within a few weeks of them coming on staff, whether they're a pastor or not, I sit down with them and I just ask, like, what are you doing with pornography? Where is it at? No one's ever said, oh, I don't deal with it. All of them. Yeah, it's something. And so my work is to help them into fidelity. And I think that's good work. And I think people can do that as pastors and as leaders. But if you're in darkness and you're not known and there isn't fidelity and there isn't honesty, you're dangerous. You're really dangerous. And it's just a mess. And so if you have sexual sin in your life, you know what? Email me. I'll help you. Or email a friend, or do whatever you can. But don't let it stay, because it will destroy you. It destroys the witness of the gospel. And it ruins people. The number one thing that people say that I talk to who aren't Christians is like, you guys don't do the things you preach. Now, I will say to them, well, is that true about me? And I don't think it's true about me. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I've learned what to do with my body and my mind around lust and sexuality. And so I have some authority there. But the reason that's said, it's not a universal truth. I don't even know if it's a majority truth, but it's true enough that people can say it, and we're all kind of dumbfounded about what to say in return. And so this is serious stuff. It's not just abstract. We have to live it. We have to experience the good news of the gospel. Then we have to practice it in our local bodies. And then we got to play some big boy or big girl ball and take this seriously and get her done. And so that's what I wanted to share tonight. And so we have a little bit of time, 15, 20 minutes, however long, for questions. And
yeah, thank you, Ron. Thank you for your insights and your suggestions and your thoughts for us. I've got 3 questions in the queue here, at least at this point. One of them is this: how do you have any ideas or recommendations about how to frame the argument or the narrative in terms of the kids? Can you say more about that? Do you have any specific ideas to share?
Sure. One of the primary work of the church is to teach, to give biblical teaching on sexuality. And now it's really important. You know, before 100 years ago, there wasn't a lot of options going on. Now there's a lot of options in other teachings. And so there has to be a catechism of sexuality. And I think one of the things we have to do is we have to teach about the theology of sexuality. The arc of Scripture is one of the main narratives is what? A husband who pursues his bride, a bride who's unfaithful in whom he still pursues. What is Ephesians 5? It's about Jesus Christ, the husband God, who will have his pure bride. And so what does that tell us about marriage and sexuality? It means that they are they're windows into another world. That's why they matter. It matters what we do with our body. It matters how we relate to one another. It's not just that God is bored. God cares deeply about our bodies, and our body is you know, the word I would use, it's mythical. It has great meaning and purpose and power. And so we have to teach that. And, you know, when they're younger, we teach about the honor of being a boy or a girl. And whatever you think about what men and women become as leaders when they grow up, what is true at any age is that a boy is different than a girl, girl's different than a boy. And that means something. It means something in the mind of God. God is the one who endues it with meaning in Genesis. Let us make man and woman in our image. You know, they bear the image of God. And so male and female, he made them. And so this image bearing in this complementarity of of gender, it has deep meaning. And Herman Bavinck actually talks about it in his book on family. He's the only Reformed thinker who has what is termed a theological anthropology. I think it's the most important thing we need to develop among our kids and our young adults is to give meaning to our ethics. And then from there, we have to teach both the joy and the good of sexuality. We have to describe why the Song of Solomon is in the Bible. And then we have to describe why boundaries are really good. And we have to do it in such a way that by the time someone is 15 or 16, they have been fully catechized in the way of Jesus Christ with their body and their sexuality. Now, I was with Rosaria Butterfield a couple of years ago. Brilliant woman, so great, and I got to spend a day and a half with her. And she was with her kid, and she's doing classical. Her kid at the time was like 8 or 9, and they were speaking Latin together, doing some, talking about the birds. And what an odd thing to do. Like, don't you send your kid to elementary school? And they were using really big words, and words that the kid didn't know anything about. The kid didn't know what she was talking about. And I asked her about it, and she said, "Well, I don't want him to understand today. I want him to understand when he's 20. And so I'm building his whole inner world with big ideas and beautiful images and with worldviews that right now mean nothing, but in which he will grow into." We have to do that. We have to catechize our children with big ideas around sexuality, around marriage, around the good of their body. I'm telling you, for the most part, if they're under 25, under 30, hardly anyone thinks that it matters what you do with your body, that there's no detriment if you have sex with somebody or you fool around with somebody. There's no cost. And that's because they've been catechized that there's no cost. There's a huge catechism around about commitment, that it doesn't matter, that you shouldn't do it, or that it's costly or whatever. There's all kinds of catechisms that are happening in which, we can't be reactive and just, lock people up in their room until they're 40. We're going to have to help them see the good of the gospel.
Right. Yes. To tie everything, all of the, commandments, boundaries, to the gospel itself is definitely essential. One other question is, what we have in the Christian Reformed Church right now, in a nutshell, is we have a church that has ordained somebody in a same-sex marriage to the office of deacon, and we have a classist that refuses to do anything about it. So that is kind of behind this question here. What is the mechanism or method to get unfaithful churches and maybe an entire classes out? And if not,
I don't know. Yeah.
And if not, if we don't have the stomach to actually throw them out, if they won't leave, then what? Yeah,
they're not going to leave unless they're forced out, because they're playing the long game. I remember being in the room with, I forgot the guy's name, but he was like the president of New Brunswick, and I was in a room with him. He said, "We're not going to leave. It's our church. We'll die here, and we'll do whatever we can to stay here." And I thought, wow, that is so interesting. I don't care about the RCA that much. Like I love the church, but I don't care about, I don't care about the name RCA. I'm an American from California, and we create new things every day. So that fidelity is very different, but liberals, they hold it. That's one of the reasons they love their denomination. I think you guys have a mechanism to bring classes to account, don't you, within the CRC?
Well, that has kind of been the understanding, but we have a polity professor at Calvary Seminary who is saying that
I met her.
Synod does not have that authority. It's basically the RCA game, where in the RCA, General Synod can't discipline any regional synods or classes. In our case, Synod used to have authority, but now the discussion is kind of going in that direction, or at least that's how I myself perceive it. So that is part of the argument or the discussion.
That mechanism has to be protected and it has to be used. And so, I don't know, one of the things that happens in our world is that the General Synod would make a pronouncement, and then, somebody would say, we need to send that to the Commission on Book of Church Order. And then by the time it got back to General Synod, they literally wouldn't do what General Synod said. They'd say it's impossible. And by what that really means is we're not going to do it. And so you have to know, depending upon how you're structured, is that you just need to have directives from your synod that acts in such a way that bypasses those spaces that are going to stop you. And you have to just call it out for what it is, to say, if we do that, then what we're really voting for is for to do nothing. And I thought we were supposed to deal with this. And so you want to create a mess. You have to keep creating messes until somebody finds a way forward. And then you have to find people who are polity nerds who can stand up to her. It's her, right?
Yeah.
I know she's the one who's using polity to enable everyone to do whatever they want. It's real beautiful. That's
Yes,
sarcasm.
that is the case. So one more question, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Jonathan to close in prayer. But let me find it here. I apologize. The notion of conversations, where it's saying that we just need to keep talking. Doesn't that actually belittle conversations that have already been had and assume nothing has been talked about up to this point of that with any lasting importance, and undermines the whole importance of talking? And is this something that needs to be said out loud and made clear? We had a recent decision by our Council of Delegates, which is kind of the Synod in the interim, to give LGBTQ voices a place to be heard at Synod. So what should we do about that?
Yeah, it's a horrible idea. And it's not that we don't love these folks. We love them. We think they're God's children and we want to save them, but they're not leading the church. You know, I have children. I don't give them my car to drive. I don't have them pay the bills. I don't ask for their thoughts about taxes. I mean, my kids tell me not to pay them because, you know, we're Americans. And so we'd all be in jail if I listened to them. If someone is wrong on this, they're immature at the very least, or they're not saved. I don't know how you get around it. And what you're doing by doing this is what it is. It's desensitizing your denomination to the radicalness of gay marriage and gay ordination. For 6 millennia, both Judaism and Christianity, unheard of that such a thing would be possible. And now in the last 20 years, we've decided that it's the best thing ever. And by just bringing story after story after story, it's like, well, I really like Mary, and Mary should be able to do what she wants. Why are we being so mean to Mary? It's not about Mary. It's about ideas. It's about the gospel, and it has to stay there. Now, you should have conversations in your home, in your church, in your city, but you know, they didn't at the Jerusalem Council. They didn't come in and ask for testimonies about, you know, who's participated in sexual idolatry and why is that a really good thing. They dealt with, you know, a serious thing, and they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to, you know, they can come in, they don't have to do anything, abstain from idol meat, and don't abstain from sexual immorality. And so that's the same kind of thing. We're setting up the field to play, and it's a different way of engaging than walking with your neighbor. And because everyone there says they're a leader, look how Paul and Jesus talks to leaders and what he holds them account to versus how Jesus talks with the least and the lost and the broken. The book of Galatians, you all ought to be Galatian leaders. You know, Paul hopes that people cut off their genitalia because they're so wrong. I mean, it's really funny. It's so humorous, but it's very foul. And, if you said that, to somebody at General Synod, you would be censored or, rebuked. And so the more that you normalize this conversation, you lose. That's not what you're doing here. You're not talking about whether you like gay people. Everyone likes gay people. If they don't, they're bigots. What we're talking about is what is the gospel. And what we need are people who are faithful to the gospel to decide that, not the person who is not mature enough to articulate it.
Yeah. Well, Ron, I'm just looking at the time, and I'm getting more questions coming in here, but I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking that we need to wrap it up. I just wanted to say thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your witness, your testimony, and just given the time with all of the notes you had there. That it looks like you put in a lot of time for this. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for sharing with us, and yeah, keep us in your prayers, because the next year will be big, between now and next June. So
I'm
yeah.
very thankful for all of you. I was so honored to be asked, and yeah, some of you guys I know, and I hope all the best for you, and that you'll see the Lord do extraordinary things. You will see the Lord do extraordinary things. So be blessed, guys.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ron. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Jonathan Fisher from New Hope Church to wrap things up.
Aaron, thank you, Ron. I'm on the steering committee as well, the prayer working team for that. And I'll share just those details in just a moment. Actually, I'll just give a brief plug for that. First, just going to read, familiar with this passage, Ephesians 6. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. And then it goes into the armor of God. I think sometimes we often stop at helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, but right after it says, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. And prayer is spiritual warfare, and we are in warfare here, and this is not for the faint-hearted, and this is convicting to me. And you read even the story of Phineas and dealing with intermarriage in the Old Testament, and you realize that, again, this is war, and not against flesh and blood. And so we need to pray for ourselves, that we would fight that battle well, fight it courageously, and fight it in the right way. And we need to pray for our denomination, because God doesn't only care about, I believe, individuals, but also even groups like that. Before I close, I'll just share one other thing, and then the details of prayer. We have, there's a regional pastor who, in our area in Maine, who leads, and has led something like 26 Alpha programs at their church, and pretty much the entire congregation there has come in through Alpha, maybe coming to faith through that. And he said that there are years where they have gone through everything with Alpha, and they have prayed and taken the actual amount of time, like to truly go to God in prayer and plead on behalf of this Alpha program, and they see people saved. And they've had other years where they've done everything else, all the meal preparation, everything, and basically done kind of in a cursory manner approach prayer, and not much at all has happened. And so God, I think, often doesn't give us stuff if we don't ask for it. So we do have a weekly prayer meeting every single Tuesday, 12 to 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, with Abide. And so if you want to be receiving weekly email updates or email reminders with the Zoom link for that, please just message me in the chat right here with your email, and I'll add you to that. We're very punctual. We start basically right at 12, finish right at 12:30. So I want to be really considerate of your time. We're very focused in that, and I'd really urge you to join for that. That's crucial, and that is not pray or work hard, pray or strive. The two go absolutely hand in hand. We're in a battle here, and this is more than just about us. This is about God's church. So send me your email in the chat if you'd like to be included in those reminders for that weekly prayer. I'd love to have you. Let's close in prayer. Our God, we don't want to be about this just because we like a fight, or we don't want to be about this just because of this particular issue, but because of a love for you, because of a desire to see you honored, to see your church pure, to see a solid witness to the world. And so, Father, even as Ron shared, forgive us for the ways that we have failed to truly disciple and discipline well within the churches where you have entrusted to our care under your ultimate care. So we want to start with that, Lord, recognizing our need for forgiveness. And then please also send us out, not only in those spheres, that we be faithful to the charge that you've given us in your power, not our own, but also that we'd have clear eyes, strategic moves that are holy, that are not worldly, and also just a boldness and a willingness to be led by your Spirit, even as we approach Synod and even on the floor of Synod, that would, Lord, be recognized as truly from you, a boldness that is not just human, but is divine. Let it be for your glory and not ours. And please send us out, and please continue to increase your work through Abide, and let it be shaped by your priorities and not our own. Thank you for Ron, and we entrust him and Kingdom Network into your hands. Thank you for this evening. We pray these things in Jesus' name, our Lord, Savior, our Sovereign. Amen.